Welcome to The Heart of Health Live. There's a place for modern medicine in your life. Learn to use it correctly by getting your toughest questions answered on today's broadcast. Discover modern medicine's strengths and weaknesses. Lifestyle medicine opens the door to optimum health and healing. How you live and what you eat can profoundly affect mind and body. Learn simple solutions to complex problems. God provides the ultimate healing we all desire. He wants us healthy and happy. We just need to understand His plan for our lives and live accordingly. And now, live from Studio 1A in Chattanooga, Tennessee, here's your Heart of Health host, Dr. James Marcum.
I'm glad you took the time to join us. We have a topic that's going to be so interesting today. You want to talk to your friends and neighbors. We also invite you to call in if you have a question on our topic. I'm going to tell you what our topic is right now, but I'm going to give you some clues first so you can see if you can figure out what we're going to talk about. What medical condition affects about 9.5% of our population? That's about 18 million people. What medical condition also affects women about twice as much as men? What is the 9th leading cause of death in America? Which also, this is very interesting, which also medical condition affects 4% of preschoolers? Now that's going to be a hard clue. 4% of preschoolers, and in that age group, this medical condition has increased 23% the diagnosis over the last year. Have I stumped you yet? 80% of all people that see their medical doctors have this condition. Well, have you figured it out yet? Probably not. That condition is depression. This is something that we're going to talk a lot about on Heart of Health Live because depression affects so many people. It's estimated that 30% of women have depression. And unfortunately, if depression is untreated, it could lead to suicide. And untreated depression, they say 15% of untreated depressed people might commit suicide in the data. Well, today we have an expert to talk and answer your questions about depression. Our phone number, 855-644-3278. We want you to call in. Talk to us. We want to help you. We want to steer you in the right direction. We want to answer your questions. If you're clinically depressed, we want to help you. Dr. Tim Jennings is with us. He's a frequent guest. He's our expert on mental health issues on HeartWise. He's going to be our guest frequently. Dr. Jennings is president-elect of the Tennessee Psychiatric Association. He's head of a ministry called Come and Reason. Their website's comeandreason.com. He wrote a best-selling book, Could It Be This Simple? And he has a thriving practice in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We're glad we have him here with us. He's going to enlighten us because unfortunately, I think the way the healthcare system and third-party payers have been working, we're missing the boat when it comes to psychiatric disease. If we were improving our mental issues, mental depression, we wouldn't see these numbers going up every year. We wouldn't see the use of medicines that might or might not work go up every year. So we need to talk about this. We need to bring a new framework to discussion on depression. So we're glad you joined us here on Heart of Health, where you are the program. You can go into our website, heartwiseministries.org. Our phone number, once again, 855-644-3278. We're going to be right back with Dr. Tim Jennings answering your question after this break.
The Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
I'm Dr. James Marcum, and I talk to patients every day who want to know the truth in healthcare. On our website, heartwiseministries.org, you can have your questions answered. You can read my blog where I talk about interesting and controversial subjects in medicine. You might choose to go to the radio or television sections and learn more about all sorts of health topics. Take the time and go to heartwiseministries.org.
Have you ever heard things about God that didn't make sense? Have you ever thought that science and Scripture cannot be reconciled? Have you heard ideas about God that scare you? Or are you just tired and confused? If you want answers to complex problems, if you want a testable, evidence-based understanding of God and the world around you, an understanding in which the Bible and science harmonize to reveal the reality that God is love all the time, then Come and Reason Ministries is for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, board-certified psychiatrist, and Come and Reason Ministries is dedicated to helping you learn to discern, to stimulate you to think, to help hone and refine your ability to know the right from the wrong, the healthy from the unhealthy, and teach you how to experience healing of your mind, body, and relationships here and now. If you would like an evidence-based approach to knowing God, then visit us online at comeandreason.com.
Hello, I'm Joe Coaches. If you enjoy Heartwise Ministry as much as I do, you just might want to become involved. We would first really appreciate your prayer that God would continue to bless and lead this unique ministry. Also, it is very important that you think about becoming a financial partner supporting us so that we can take this message throughout the world to everyone. Thank you.
You've got questions, we've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
I am so fired up about our discussion tonight. I'm so glad Dr. Jennings is with us because I don't think we as a society are doing this disease justice. Dr. Jennings, welcome to Heart of Health Live.
Thanks, great to be here.
Let's start off by telling, what is depression and why is this such a big issue?
Okay, and we can describe depression from two sides. We can describe depression from the experiential side, what the person who has depression experiences.
Good.
And we can describe depression, what's going on in the body when somebody's depressed. And those are really two different things.
Well, let's start with the symptoms so someone out there might know if they might be depressed.
Okay. Depression, but in order to have depression, it's more than just a change in the way you feel, it's also a change in the way you function.
Okay.
So it's and because the brain is altered in depression, there's a constellation of symptoms people experience across the life spectrum, including alteration in appetite, alteration in energy, alteration in thinking or concentration, alteration in sleep, alteration in ability to experience pleasure, alteration in motivation, drive, initiative, alteration in libido, and ruminating about death, feelings of worthlessness. These are the symptoms that people have when they're depressed.
So there's not a blood test or a CAT scan that shows depression? It's just...
Well, there's not one that's standardized yet.
Okay.
However, that doesn't mean there aren't biologic markers for depression, and there are. I mean, when somebody has a PET scan, there's certain brain changes that are consistent with depression, particularly different parts of the brain become underactive, the parts where you think and reason, the parts where you experience pleasure. These are well documented to be underactive or sluggish when somebody's depressed, and the parts of the brain where you experience anxiety, fear, rumination, guilt, dread, those are overactive. And certain types of brain scans can show those changes in brain circuitry activity.
Okay, so those are symptoms. Now let's move to the physical changes.
Well, the physical changes that happen when somebody's depression, what contributes, generally overview, is a high stress, high inflammatory state.
Okay.
When chronic stress and chronic inflammation happens, it causes the inflammatory factors to actually damage the brain. We damage the white cells of the brain, which provide the trophic support or the support that keeps the neurons healthy, and the neurons begin to wither and die, and we lose volume in certain brain regions. And so chronic inflammation damages the brain, leads to depression. This is the general concept of what seems to be happening in depression.
So this is not, for years we've treated this mainly as a chemical problem. This is a structural problem first that causes a chemical problem?
Well, the whole idea of a chemical problem is really, I think, is a misnomer. If you give somebody an antidepressant, the idea of a chemical problem, and people listening, if you've been to your doctor, they'll say maybe you've got don't have enough serotonin, or we don't have enough dopamine, don't have enough neurotransmitter, okay? And people think that an antidepressant increases neurotransmitters. It doesn't. Well, and one neuron wants to talk to another neuron. The presynaptic neuron wants to talk to a postsynaptic neuron. It releases the neurotransmitter into a little space called a synapse, and then there's little vacuum cleaners on the cell that releases it called reuptake pumps that will suck that back in to reuse again. The antidepressants, most of them, block those little reuptake pumps, which, if the neuron is firing, will leave the neurotransmitter out in the space longer. But that's affecting the machinery that transports the neurotransmitter. It does not affect the production of neurotransmitter. Secondly, when you give an antidepressant, within minutes, really, of ingestion, within 30 minutes, 45, 60 minutes of ingestion, you will have absorption, you will have transport to the brain, and you will be blocking the neurotransmitters and reducing the reuptake, so increasing availability in synaptic spaces. This is why if somebody takes an antidepressant, they get side effects on the first day.
Right.
Okay? But they don't get better on the first day. What does that tell you? That tells you if it was merely just not having enough neurotransmitters in the synaptic spaces of the brain, you would just, wow, I feel so much better now that I've taken this medicine. But people don't get well for days or weeks if the medicines even work.
Right. Well, I read a statistic that a lot of, 30% of the treatment for depression is unsuccessful. Now, 30% only successful, so 70% of people that are being treated for depression are being treated unsuccessful.
Well, when you say treated, let's be more specific.
Yeah.
Medications.
Right,
Medications usually about 27 to 30% of the time are working on the first trial of medication. It actually goes down after that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you take a group of people, treat them with an antidepressant, about 27% of them will get well. If you transfer them to another drug, about 15, 16% of them will get well. Transfer another drug goes to even lower, and it just keeps going down and down.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, we have a question coming up after the break about the different treatment options for depression, but let's keep talking about, so really when you approach someone that meets these criteria for depression, you're thinking about, well, how has their brain been damaged or changed, right?
Yeah, when I see someone with depression, I understand that the brain is out of balance. The circuits are not firing in the proper way. I understand that this has been contributed. There's an inflammatory cascade going on in the body with increasing what are called inflammatory cytokines. And so I'm asking myself, what are the contributing factors? Now, one of the great failings in modern psychiatry is that modern psychiatry has taught people to diagnose with checklist diagnosis of symptoms. And then they target the symptoms with medications.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to go back to your questions after a break on Heart of Health Live. Stay with us, 855-644-3278. We'll be right back.
The Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
You can easily spend $90 on an expensive meal out. How about investing $89.94 in your future? Just think about the possibility of coming off those prescription pills and getting rid of all the side effects. Think about feeling better than you have ever felt in your life. This is all possible for you. For only $89.94, you will receive a 7-part DVD series, Weight Management by the Book, a 30-lesson workbook with over 100 recipes, and if ordered today, exercise tubes will be included for free to help with your journey. There are many programs available, but this unique program has identified the truth about how to manage weight. This program is not available in stores. This limited offer will not last long. Pick up the phone now and dial 877-504-9628. Operators are standing by. This call will change your life forever.
So here's a question. If you love Jesus, and I mean truly love him, people will notice, right? I mean, if Jesus is at the center of everything you do, people will have to notice. And that is exactly what Life Talk is all about. You see, at Life Talk, our goal has always been to connect people to the true source of power, Jesus Christ. We know with Jesus at the center of our lives, nothing is impossible.
There's a place for modern medicine, but that's not enough. There's a place for lifestyle, but that's not enough. The real truth in medicine, the real truth in healing comes from that relationship with the Heavenly Father. That relationship can show us the balance, when to use modern medicine, when to use lifestyle, and to use it for the right reasons. Well, this book gives the solution to the healthcare dilemma. It answers the question, why am I sick? How do I get better? And how can I have ultimate healing?
You've got questions? We've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
Welcome back to Heart of Health Live. We're here with Dr. Timothy Jennings. He's president-elect of the Tennessee Psychiatric Association. His website, if you're interested in learning about some of the ministry part of what he does, is comeandreason.com. And there you can find a great book that I've read. It is called Could It Be This Simple? Dr. Jennings has a thriving practice in the Chattanooga area, and we're glad he's our guest. And we've been talking about this subject called depression, which affects now almost 10% of our population. So you're walking around, you see 1 person out of 10 has this disease. And let's go to our questions that have come into our website. And our first question, Dr. Jennings, has to do with what are the treatment options for depression? Now I'm not going to ask you what are the treatment options that normally people get, because normally people walk to their doctor, they spend 2 times with them, they say, oh, you got depression, here's a prescription. What's the approach that you take and that I think should be taken when someone is diagnosed with depression?
I'm going to tell you that, but I do want to comment on what I think are some of the failings that are happening across America and why people aren't getting well. Because of the way the health industry works, third-party payers have driven psychiatrists out of the business of being comprehensive providers to the health care of their patient. We were taught years ago to look at biopsychosocial contributions to patients' mental health problems and to be comprehensive in addressing those problems. And in a day, psychiatrists would take an hour with their patients and evaluate them, do counseling, do family sessions, all this kind of stuff to address the whole family and do the whole work, to get people well. People had better outcomes. What's happened though with third-party payers, they've driven psychiatrists into this little narrow niche of being pill pushers, and they'll come to a doctor and they'll get 5 to 10 minutes and it's a prescription out the door. They come back and got a problem, they put another one, a prescription out the door, and a prescription out the door. And I have patients coming to me from various practitioners with 6 and 7 different psychotropic medicines all at one time, and they're just not doing well. Wow. And I think this is a artifact, maybe it's an unintended consequence, some might allege it's an intended consequence. Regardless of, it's happening out there where people are not getting comprehensive assessment and care because of the time constraints put upon them by third-party payers. If they actually took the time that they'd like to get, they would actually then be paying out of their pocket to see the patient, because they couldn't even pay the bills and their overhead and their staff to keep the doors open. I mean, you know this as a practitioner. You know this is exactly how it works. So what do I do? When I assess a patient, I looked at the person holistically, and I'm asking, what are the contributing factors that brought this person to this condition? Right. And I understand there's an underlying inflammatory cascade that causes an imbalance in neural circuits where the fear circuits of the brain become overactive and the thinking circuits of the brain become underactive when somebody is depressed. And so if you look at a person's lifestyle, for instance, there are things that increase inflammation. Recent studies show that patients who eat fast foods have a 30 to 40% higher rate of depression than people who eat fast food and junk food than people who don't eat those foods, because those foods are high inflammatory foods. Well, the studies show that people who are obese by the time they're 65 have 7% less brain mass than people who are the same age that are not obese, because obesity is an inflammatory condition, increases inflammation. High stress states, if you're in a conflicted relationship where there's conflict at home of some kind, for instance, that's a high stress state. That is a contributing factor for depression. If you smoke cigarettes, drink alcohol, do illegal drugs, these are damaging inflammatory things that not only directly damage the neural circuits, but they also increase inflammation, which causes the inflammatory cascade. And so when I look at a patient, what I do is I want to remove the offending elements, and then I want to bring in healing elements. And healing elements are always going to be putting us back in harmony with God's design. Now, I tell my patients, what kind of car do you drive? And they say, oh, I drive with Chevy, whatever. And I say, and it takes unleaded fuel. And they say, yes. And I said, and the manufacturer built it to run on that fuel. I said, what would happen if you ignore the instructions and put diesel in there instead? Right. Like, oh, it's not going to run well. It's going to break down. I said, well, God built us to run on certain fuels, on certain protocols, okay? If we can violate those protocols and put anything we want, but if you put stuff in our system that we weren't designed to run on, the system's going to break down. Okay, and so we want to bring in the whole healthy foods, things that are high in antioxidants to reduce oxidative stress. This is healing to the brain. And so I put patients on omega-3 fatty acids. I tell them to eat almonds. I tell them to eat fruits and vegetables with more colors in them, the better, and the raw form's better too. I tell them to take out as much as they are willing to do of the red meats and the dairy and some of this stuff because it's highly inflammatory, and we want to decrease inflammation. And then we can, I think we have a break coming up here in a minute again. Yeah. And after the break, I have some other things I want to talk about how we treat patients.
Okay. So the first start is to treat inflammation and look at it from a myriad.
In a holistic sense, not by giving a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug.
Well, this is such a great change in the philosophy that we're being taught in our world. We're talking a pill and a bill for our ills, but our real treatment by get at the cause. And I think this is the way we as a society need to start thinking. We're glad you're with us. If you have a question, go to our website or give us a call at 855-644-3278. You're watching Heart of Health Live. Stay with us.
Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
I'm Dr. James Marcum, and I talk to patients every day who want to know the truth in healthcare. On our website, heartwiseministries.org, you can have your questions answered. You can read my blog where I talk about interesting and controversial subjects in medicine. You might choose to go to the radio or television sections and learn more about all sorts of health topics. Take the time and go to heartwiseministries.org.
So here's a question. If you love Jesus, and I mean truly love him, people will notice, right? I mean, if Jesus is at the center of everything you do, people will have to notice. And that is exactly what Life Talk is all about. You see, at Life Talk, our goal has always been to connect people to the true source of power, Jesus Christ. We know with Jesus at the center of our lives, nothing is impossible.
You can easily spend $90 on an expensive meal out. How about investing $89.94 in your future? Just think about the possibility of coming off those prescription pills and getting rid of all the side effects. Think about feeling better than you have ever felt in your life. This is all possible for you. For only $89.94, you will receive a 7-part DVD series, Weight Management by the Book, a 30-lesson workbook with over 100 recipes, and if ordered today, exercise tubes will be included for free to help with your journey. There are many programs available, but this unique program has identified the truth about how to manage weight. This program is not available in stores. This limited offer will not last long. Pick up the phone now and dial 877-504-9628. Operators are standing by. This call will change your life forever.
Hello, I'm Joe Coaches. If you enjoy Heartwise Ministry as much as I do, you just might want to become involved. We would first really appreciate your prayer that God would continue to bless and lead this unique ministry. Also, it is very important that you think about becoming a financial partner supporting us so that we can take this message throughout the world to everyone. Thank you.
You've got questions, we've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
Well, I hope we've got answers, and unfortunately in our time, sometimes we can't get to all the answers. And before break, we were answering this question, and what are the treatment options for depression? And I think we started with inflammation and all the things that we can do holistically to change our chemistry to stop inflammation, and also things that we might eliminate in our lifestyle that might be causing elimination. Dr. Jennings, let's say this person that asked this question said, I've done these things, I've eliminated some things that cause inflammation, I'm exercising, I'm doing some other things. You know, I was one of the 30% of people that are overweight and I'm losing weight, I'm starting to feel better, but I'm not quite where I want to be. What would be the next step in the treatment plan for this person with depression?
Okay, other treatments that are actually available and shown to be better than placebo for depression. The standard one, and the one that's most common, of course, are antidepressant medications.
Okay.
But antidepressant medications come with a lot of baggage associated with them. Weight gain, sexual dysfunction, cognitive changes, risks to pregnancy, lots of risks and stuff. But for many patients, they are truly, I want to be very clear, for some patients they're lifesavers. Without those, they would not be functioning at all.
Okay.
But as you pointed out earlier, about 70% of patients they never work for. So they go through medicine after medicine after medicine with side effect and problem and don't get well. So I think we would say the subset, the minority of patients, medicines do well for. The majority of patients need some other intervention besides medication. Cognitive therapies and various psychotherapies can also be very helpful.
Now stop there. What is psychotherapy? What is cognitive psychotherapy?
Talk therapy.
Okay.
And what talk therapy does, it's not simply, and there are different kinds of therapy, but I'm not a big advocate of pet therapy. And what I mean by that is going in and having somebody dote on you and pet on you, poor thing. That must be awful for you, and not really ever give any substantive, meaningful interaction or feedback. The therapies that I find helpful are therapies in which it engages the person's own thinking and teaches them how to reassess and reevaluate their life, their issues, and bring new perspectives to bear, and then have a different way of making decisions than they've historically done. So it's really changing the entire process of the internal working of the mind.
Well, that's interesting because I don't think our system thinks of cognitive therapy as equivalent to doing something like a dose of chemotherapy or an angioplasty. They don't value that, and yet you're telling me it gets at the cause, it might change the symptoms, and might eliminate the problem.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. It has been completely undervalued, and it is very powerful, and we can show with brain scans that cognitive therapy actually changes brain function and structure.
Okay.
By exercise, it's just like anything else. You exercise it, it gets bigger. You don't exercise it, it gets smaller. And so cognitive therapy teaches the parts of the brain where you think to exercise more, and you can actually see enhanced neural circuitry and connections in those areas when you practice this.
Now, in cognitive therapy, do you teach them things that might be damaging to their brain as far as their cognition goes?
It depends on who's doing the therapy, doesn't it? Okay. And not all therapy is equal. Not all therapists are equal. You do have to be judicious in who you allow to do your therapy with. So some therapies actually can be injurious and harmful, and some therapies very, very healing and restorative. So you can't just cookie cutter it all.
Okay.
And then there are other things. In our practice here in Chattanooga, we also provide the only FDA-approved drug-free treatment for depression called transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Yeah,
How does that work?
Well, transcranial means it goes across the cranium, across the skull.
Right.
We give strong magnetic pulses. These aren't magnets you can buy in a store. This is an electromagnet the strength of an MRI. Okay. And we give pulses to the front part of the brain that controls mood that is suppressed in depression. And those pulses of magnetic energy actually cause those neurons to fire in real time. And in teaching them to fire in real time, it actually activates them, depolarizes them. It recruits new neurons. Neurotropic factors are turned on.
Wow.
And if you've heard of a thing called kindling, which is the more the neurons fire, the easier they kind of learn to fire.
Learn it, right.
Okay. And it's really putting the circuits back in balance in real time. That's what TMS is doing.
So it's like exercising your brain and getting them stronger and recruiting them. What's the side effects?
The only side effect is the tingling feeling you can get on the scalp during the treatment. That's it. No other side effects. There's no drugs, no chemicals. You're awake, you're alert, no IVs, no anesthesia, nothing. And when you're done, you get up and just go about your business.
Now, what are the trials in regards to the results of this type of therapy?
Okay, it was a great question. When they did the trials, they only took patients who had failed antidepressants. And on average, they had failed an average of 4 antidepressants. And if you look at studies with people on medicines, the likelihood of getting well on a medicine after 4 failures is about 6%. Wow. And in the studies on these, 55% of patients were 50% improved, and 35% of patients were 100% well in the actual studies they've done.
Well, you know what I'd like to see, Dr. Jennings? I would like to see a head-to-head study on patients that are depressed, and I think this is reasonable since so many people have depression, and study as a first-line treatment, transcranial magnetic versus a medicine versus all these things. I think it'd be very interesting. Well, Diana, I know you're on the line with us from North Carolina. Stay with us after this break. We're going to be back and answer your question. And if others are out there, give us a call, 855-644-3278. We're here with Dr. Tim Jennings answering your questions on Heart of Health. We'll be right back.
The Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
I'm Dr. James Marcum, and I talk to patients every day who want to know the truth in healthcare. On our website, heartwiseministries.org, you can have your questions answered. You can read my blog where I talk about interesting and controversial subjects in medicine. You might choose to go to the radio or television sections and learn more about all sorts of health topics. Take the time and go to heartwiseministries.org.
Have you ever heard things about God that didn't make sense? Have you ever thought that science and Scripture cannot be reconciled? Have you heard ideas about God that scare you? Or are you just tired and confused? If you want answers to complex problems, if you want a testable, evidence-based understanding of God and the world around you, an understanding in which the Bible and science harmonize to reveal the reality that God is love all the time, then Come and Reason Ministries is for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, board-certified psychiatrist, and Come and Reason Ministries is dedicated to helping you learn to discern, to stimulate you to think, to help hone and refine your ability to know the right from the wrong, the healthy from the unhealthy, and teach you how to experience healing of your mind, body, and relationships here and now. If you would like an evidence-based approach to knowing God, then visit us online at comeandreason.com.
Hello, I'm Joe Coaches. If you enjoy Heartwise Ministry as much as I do, you just might want to become involved. We would first really appreciate your prayer that God would continue to bless and lead this unique ministry. Also, it is very important that you think about becoming a financial partner supporting us so that we can take this message throughout the world to everyone. Thank you.
You've got questions, we've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
Welcome back to Heart of Health Live. You know, 500 years ago, or 300 years ago, if you didn't put leeches on your patients, you weren't considered a good doctor. In the 1930s, if you didn't have cigarettes for people with asthma, you were considered a bad doctor. If they look back, Dr. Jennings, on some of the things we're doing now, in the future, they're going to say, hey, listen, what they were doing is just crazy and wrong. They were killing society, all these medicines with side effects that can kill people with suicide, all these medicines. They were a whole approach to a disease that affects every other system they just totally messed up on. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. So I'm glad we're talking today. You're on the cutting edge, so I give you some credit here to stepping, where no places go. And what we're trying to do, friend, is get this message out. But we have a question from North Carolina. Diana, thank you for being so patient with us. You're on with Dr. Tim Jennings. What's your question tonight, Diana?
Well, thank you for taking my call. My question, I don't think will require quite as technical a response as was previously given. It has to do with the Olympics that have been going on. I don't know if you've watched at all the girls' gymnastics team, and the girls are ranging they're teens, obviously, like 15, 16, 17, 18. And the one coming into the Olympics to be, the one that they said was going to be the all-around champion and everything, did
Jordan.
not turn out to be that way.
Jordan Weber.
So yes, she had tremendous disappointment, and they showed her the night that she realized that she wasn't going to go into the all-around, crying, and they kept going on and on about how she had worked all her life for this moment in time. So, Dr. Jennings, my question to you is, if this was your daughter, and she had put all this focus on her life for this one moment, what would you say to her to keep from getting depressed?
Well, first off, what she's experiencing is disappointment, and disappointment is not depression.
Right.
Disappointment, and she's experiencing loss, which can also include grief, but grief is not depression. And while they can have a common symptom, meaning being sadness and heartache, The actual underlying causes are different. The disappointment and grief are to a sudden, specific, usually identifiable stressor that they are psychologically having to wrestle with and come to grips with, whereas depression is a brain-body illness that actually alters both the structure and function of the brain itself. Now, an acute stressor like that could, however, lead someone,
down the road,
if it's not resolved properly, into developing a depression. And so I'm going to take your question to mean, okay, I understand she's disappointed, she's heartbroken. How do we intervene in a way where she
doesn't progress to something else?
It doesn't progress. Well, she has to obviously come to resolve the experience in a way that she can have peace with it. And that's the key. She can't look back on this in a way that it eats at her forever. Now, one way to do that would be, hopefully, as parents, they actually did not make Olympics the number one thing in her life.
Right.
They made developing a Christ-like character and living for God the number one thing in her life. And if that's the case, then that can never be taken from her. But if Olympics are all the only thing that she has to live for, and that's taken from her, then that's going to have a much bigger psychological hit to her. Mm-hmm. And then so how do you deal with that? Would be to give her something else, like reframing the experience in the context of a larger reality, like an eternal reality, and also redirecting her perhaps to another opportunity.
Wow, that's good.
Well, what about overachievers in general who have these perfectionistic tendencies? So they're disappointed when they don't reach the level that they think that you could be at. Doesn't that just kind of go in a circle and could ultimately? I mean, I could just see that would.
I have a lot of patients that come into my office with this perfectionistic type thinking and trying to be perfect. And what really drives that ultimately is fear of failure and fear of being rejected for not being good enough. And because of that fear, they're constantly worried about how they'll be perceived by other people and disappointing other people and or making an error that will come back on them in some way. And they make a serious internal cognitive distortion, and it's this. They don't differentiate the difference between innocent mistakes and choosing evil. When they make innocent mistakes, they feel bad and they feel guilty, just like we are supposed to feel when we choose evil. And therefore, they have this terrible internal distorted self-image in which they always feel bad and they feel dirty or they feel inferior or they feel inadequate because they have not recognized the difference between an innocent mistake and choosing evil. And in my practice, I help them recognize the difference that everyone makes mistakes. Mistakes and evil are not the same. And disappointment and guilt are not the same.
Diana, thank you for your question. Hope that answered it. Thank you for joining us. And we have to go to break right now. We'll be right back after this break, so stay with us.
The Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
There's a place for modern medicine, but that's not enough. There's a place for lifestyle, but that's not enough. The real truth in medicine, the real truth in healing comes from that relationship with the Heavenly Father. That relationship can show us the balance, when to use modern medicine, when to use lifestyle, and to use it for the right reasons. Well, this book gives the solution to the healthcare dilemma. It answers the question, why am I sick? How do I get better? And how can I have ultimate healing? I'm Dr. James Marcum, and I talk to patients every day who want to know the truth in healthcare. On our website, heartwiseministries.org, you can have your questions answered. You can read my blog where I talk about interesting and controversial subjects in medicine. You might choose to go to the radio or television sections and learn more about all sorts of health topics. Take the time and go to heartwiseministries.org.
You've got questions, we've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
We're glad you stayed with us, and I hope that that question from North Carolina was answered. Sometimes with these breaks we have to get in and out, and we have quite a few people that have called in anonymously with their questions. They didn't want to talk on air. We're going to get to some of their questions, Dr. Jennings. One of our callers said fish oil is really helping her depression. Are there other, she wants you address the benefits of the omega-3 fish oils.
Okay, let's talk about omega-3 fatty acids, and they do come from fish oil. Omega-3 fatty acids are oils or nutrients that the brain and body require, but brain and body cannot make them.
Okay.
If we don't get them in the foods we eat, we don't have them, and that means the brain doesn't have them. Now, these are actually building blocks of the membranes of your neurons. Okay. So the membrane of each cell are constructed or built out of omega-3s and omega-6s, plus the various proteins that make up the receptors and so forth. If we don't have these, that changes the fluidity of the membrane, so it's more rigid and stiff, and it doesn't signal as well. And multiple studies show we have higher rates of mood disorder, bipolar disorder, depression. Additionally, it's been indicated to be a contributing factor in postpartum depression because when a person's pregnant, there's a brain forming inside the womb, and that brain needs omega-3s. And where do those omega-3s come from?
Right.
They come from the mama. And if the mama's not getting them in her diet, they're coming out of her brain. And so the more children she has, the more prone she will be to having postpartum depression. Wow. So a lot of OBGYN now are actually supplementing omega-3s with the prenatal vitamin with omega-3s now because of this. Now, some people wonder, fish oil omega-3s, plant source omega-3s.
Right.
Well, there's generally three types of omega-3 fatty acids. There's the short chain, which is called abbreviated ALA. That comes in flax and food sources. And that version is not usable in your brain, the short version. Now, your liver can what's called conjugate it or string together the ALAs to make the type the brain needs, which is both EPA and DHA. Okay. Now, the problem is it's a competitive pathway in your liver that is being used for other processes as well, and only about 1% of your ALA will be converted into the form of the brain needs. So if you're getting it primarily from a plant source, you're really getting a very little conversion for your brain. So I do recommend my patients take the fish oil, and the brain needs both the EPA and the ALA, the EPA and the DHA. The DHA becomes the part of the building block of the neural membranes, where the EPA is a powerful anti-inflammatory. Right. Okay, and so it decreases the inflammation, shown that if you take this throughout your life, it can reduce risk of dementia as you age. It also reduces peripheral inflammation, reduces triglycerides and cholesterol, reduces your risk of ischemic heart attacks and strokes. If you're a diabetic patient, you probably know that diabetics have high inflammatory states because of something called hemoglobin A1C, which is very inflammatory, which damages peripheral tissues, like they get retinal problems and can go blind, kidney problems and can have kidney failure, peripheral neuropathies, and this is all due to the inflammation. Omega-3 fatty acid supplementation has been shown to reduce the damage to the end organs, those peripheral organs, from the inflammation of diabetes. So it's a very, very good nutrient to take. I thank the caller for calling in and alerting us about it. I put my patients, almost all of them, on it.
Now, fish oil, let's say that someone doesn't want to, let's say they're a strict vegan, doesn't want to take any animal products. Can they still get enough in almonds and walnuts and other things? Can they still get enough?
In my view, no.
Okay. Now, if you put someone on a fish oil supplement, which one would you choose? How much should they take? How often?
There's a lot of different ones out there, and over-the-counter ones are pretty much reasonably the same. The one I actually use a prescription version that I take myself because it's very high concentration. It's pharmaceutical grade, so it's not going to have to worry about any of the heavy metals or things like that because it's really, really good quality. And that's a brand called Lovesa. And you can get a prescription from your doctor, and it's just omega-3 fatty acids.
Yeah, and that's something that I don't see too many side effects from fish oils.
There's one side effect, and that is when you belch, you can taste a fishy tasting belch.
Okay.
But there's a risk, and that is if you're on a blood thinner, Coumadin, for instance.
Right.
Okay, omega-3 fatty acids are also blood thinners. And at very high doses, like I put my patients on 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams or 3 to 4 grams a day. At very high doses, 7 to 10 grams a day, it actually can increase your risk of hemorrhagic stroke because it becomes a blood thinner at that dose. So if I have somebody on a blood thinner, I actually have them check with the doctor prescribing the blood thinner before they put them on this.
Right.
And I don't mean just a baby aspirin a day. Baby aspirin a day is fine.
Okay. Well, after break, we have another question that they didn't want to go on air. This is a spiritual question where talks about, in Isaiah 53 about depressions. We're going to answer that, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that Dr. Jennings is doing right now. He had this book out, Could It Be This Simple? You have another book that's coming out. How long is that going to take to finish?
Well, that book's already done. It's in the final editing process and preparation by the publisher, InterVarsity Press, and it'll be out in April.
So April of next year. So keep your eyes on that for April. And also,
and it's called The God-Shaped Brain.
The God-Shaped Brain. You want to remember that. And also his book out now is Could It Be This Simple? This can be found at his website. That's comeandreason.com. And we're so glad Dr. Tim Jennings, who's president-elect of the Tennessee Psychiatric Association, is with us today. I think he is opening our eyes to the practice of mental illness, about how it should be practiced, how we should be thinking about this problem. We need to step out of the box. We need to come up with some new ideas. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be right back after this short break. We're going to talk about spirituality and depression, so stay with us on Heart of Health Live.
The Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
Have you ever heard things about God that didn't make sense? Have you ever thought that science and Scripture cannot be reconciled? Have you heard ideas about God that scare you? Or are you just tired and confused? If you want answers to complex problems, if you want a testable, evidence-based understanding of God and the world around you, an understanding in which the Bible and science harmonize to reveal the reality that God is love all the time, then Come and Reason Ministries is for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, board-certified psychiatrist, and Come and Reason Ministries is dedicated to helping you learn to discern, to stimulate you to think, to help hone and refine your ability to know the right from the wrong, the healthy from the unhealthy, and teach you how to experience healing of your mind, body, and relationships here and now. If you would like an evidence-based approach to knowing God, then visit us online at comeandreason.com.
Imagine a classroom with no boundaries. A classroom where reenacting a book is an English class, and repairing a motor is a math lesson. A classroom where caring for horses is biology. This is our classroom. At Bachman Academy, 6th to 12th graders with ADHD, dyslexia, and other language-based learning differences are provided a language-rich, hands-on program of study. With an average of 5 students per teacher, Bachman students receive more attention and have more time to learn while using their own learning strengths. Now, imagine your child in this classroom. To learn more about Bachman Academy, visit our website at www.bachmanacademy.org. Bachman Academy, tapping potential one person at a time.
You've got questions, we've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
Welcome back to Heart of Health Live. We've enjoyed having your questions in, and don't feel like you have to talk on the phone. If you want to send them to our callers, they'll write them down and get them to me. And I got this question right here we'd like to talk about. Dr. Jennings, this caller says, in Isaiah 53, it says that Jesus was a man of sorrows. Okay? Is it possible for a person who isn't suffering from depression to be weighed down with sorrows?
And the answer, of course, is absolutely yes.
Okay.
Absolutely yes. Jesus had sorrows for multiple reasons, because he loved people so much, and when he went through and he saw people suffering, it broke his heart. A parent who sees a child suffering with an illness, in pain, with leukemia or something like this, and the child is helpless and can't fit, and the parent is helpless. They're weighed down with the sorrow. And Christ had lots of sorrows. He saw the suffering that sin was doing to his his creation. It was heartbreaking for him. But he also was hopeful, because even though he saw the pain and suffering, he knew he was coming as the solution to overcome and ultimately restore. So he was not depressed in any shape, form, or fashion. He did not have a defective brain. He didn't have brain dysfunction, but he experienced the pain and agony that comes when something you love terribly is being injured and damaged.
Well, can you elaborate a little bit on the fact that, a lot of people have depression out there. We've demonstrated with statistics, whether it be too much cortisol, which is an inflammatory marker, norepinephrine, or structural changes. You do all this stuff, but you know what? Even if you can't make a brain perfect because it's been too damaged, and that's possible, there is hope for that person.
Well, there's no question. The brain remains pliable, something called neuroplasticity, meaning that the brain is in a constant state of change. And I want everybody to listen to this very carefully. Your brain is in a constant state of change. It's either changing for the better or it's changing for the worse, but it's not staying stagnant. And depending on the choices that you make, your brain is either getting stronger because you're exercising it, you're putting in good nutrients, you're putting in good reading and cognitive materials, or it's getting weaker because you're vegetating and you're damaging it with all types of drugs, alcohol, inflammatory things. But our brains are in a constant state of flux. So if somebody's had a history of doing damaging things and they stop the damaging things and start bringing in the healing things, the brain will start producing new neurons, new connections, healing and regrowth will take place.
Yeah, the statement in the Bible, create in me a new heart. God can help this brain function as well.
Yes, and that's a very interesting question. Create me a new heart. There are no question, as we change our thought patterns, we go from a heart that is all about me, selfish, which is selfishness drives fear. Fear kicks up inflammation. Inflammation drives all these diseases. We have more problems. We have more mental health problems if we're fear-ridden and self-centered. If we have a new heart, we die to self, we love other people. Neurobiologically, the part of the brain that causes fear actually calms down when we love other people. And so we not only have a change in neurobiology, we have a change in thinking, a change in motive, a change in perspective. So we're changing, if you want to use a computer metaphor, a software is being changed first by a change in perspective, which results in a hardware change, neurobiology change.
Now, earlier you talked about how that our brains have been damaged. They've had chemical changes, structural changes in our brain. Is it possible through a relationship with God that could be a treatment, a documented treatment for these type of brain conditions?
There's no question that it is a therapeutic intervention to move from a self-based, fear-based orientation to a love-based, trust-based orientation. That will reduce fear. It will reduce the firing of the fear circuitry. It will reduce inflammation, which will take pressure off the depressive cascade. But that doesn't necessarily mean that alone will resolve depression.
Right.
But it certainly will push things in a direction that is healing.
Yeah, that's just so encouraging. So no matter how bad someone has, there's hope for you out there.
Absolutely.
They don't have to say there's nothing we can do. This is one quick question. We don't have a lot of time left, but this person says, is depression passed on from generation to generation? So is this a DNA type?
Depression is not passed on. Genetic vulnerability is passed on, and environmental conditioning is passed on. So the DNA that will make us vulnerable to these things can be passed along, and then the brain is shaped by both intrauterine experiences and childhood environmental experiences. And high-stress mothers during pregnancy will cause the brain to develop differently, so that child will be more prone to mental health problems. And then a abuse environment or neglect environment will alter the actual developing brain, so it has a different structure, so that child will be more prone to mental health problems and depression. So we pass along both the genetics to make us vulnerable, and then the environment conditioning, which can increase the risk.
Okay. Well, we've tried to answer many of your questions here, and don't worry, Dr. Jennings is going to be back with us on a regular basis. You can send your questions to our website, heartwiseministries.org. There's so much to talk about: mental health, depression, anxiety. We're glad you're joining us. Stay with us. We're going to be back for some concluding comments after this short break. Don't go away.
The Heart of Health Live will return in just a moment.
I'm Dr. James Marcum, and I talk to patients every day who want to know the truth in healthcare. On our website, heartwiseministries.org, you can have your questions answered. You can read my blog where I talk about interesting and controversial subjects in medicine. You might choose to go to the radio or television sections and learn more about all sorts of health topics. Take the time and go to heartwiseministries.org.
Have you ever heard things about God that didn't make sense? Have you ever thought that science and Scripture cannot be reconciled? Have you heard ideas about God that scare you? Or are you just tired and confused? If you want answers to complex problems, if you want a testable, evidence-based understanding of God and the world around you, an understanding in which the Bible and science harmonize to reveal the reality that God is love all the time, then Come and Reason Ministries is for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Tim Jennings, board-certified psychiatrist, and Come and Reason Ministries is dedicated to helping you learn to discern, to stimulate you to think, to help hone and refine your ability to know the right from the wrong, the healthy from the unhealthy, and teach you how to experience healing of your mind, body, and relationships here and now. If you would like an evidence-based approach to knowing God, then visit us online at comeandreason.com.
Hello, I'm Joe Coaches. If you enjoy Heartwise Ministry as much as I do, you just might want to become involved. We would first really appreciate your prayer that God would continue to bless and lead this unique ministry. Also, it is very important that you think about becoming a financial partner supporting us so that we can take this message throughout the world to everyone. Thank you.
You've got questions, we've got answers on the Heart of Health Live. Welcome back.
Dr. Jennings, we just have a short time. Why don't you give our audience a couple take-home messages? I know we talked about a lot, but just give them one or two things that they can really hold on until you come back and join us again.
Your life is yours. No matter what situation you find yourself in, you have power to make choices. Choices make changes. If you don't know how to change it yourself, then choose to go see a professional and get some help and get some direction. But don't be discouraged. Don't give up hope, because depression is treatable.
That's excellent. And don't worry, Dr. Jennings is going to be back with us again, since almost 10% of our population has depression and other mental illness. This is something we're going to be talking a lot about. We need to do it better in our system. We need to get the word out that we need to treat this. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight on Heart of Health Live. I invite you to go to our website, heartwiseministries.org. If you want more information about Dr. Jennings, go to his website, comeandreason.com. He'll be happy to answer your questions. He's got a lot of great material there. We want to thank you for joining us each and every week here on Heart of Health Live, where you are the program. If you want to give us an email, we'd love to answer your questions on air, either before or after. So thanks for joining us tonight. We'll be back next time.